What's up, y'all? It's T-Tar, and today we're going to be talking about one of the best things that are happening in Pokemon right now, and it is Kieran's return in the second DLC. This opens up a big opportunity that I want to talk about in this video. So the first DLC ends with Kieran wanting to become stronger. This would imply on the surface that he's going to get a bit of a redemption arc in the second DLC, which we know he's a part of. He's in Blueberry Academy, he's in the key artwork. I think the ultimate redemption for him would be if he somehow ended up as the strongest trainer in Blueberry Academy, aka the champion. Of course, we don't know if Blueberry Academy has so-called champions, or maybe they take the same concept from Paldia and have multiple champions, but he does wear that glove, and it would be cool if that turned into a black glove and he actually became a champion. So imagine the second DLC, we go to Blueberry Academy, we do a bunch of quests, get the Elite Four together, and when we're fighting them one by one, at the end, Kieran's there as the champion, and it brings his story full circle. He wanted to be the strongest, now he kind of is. So that's one idea, but see, I wanted to talk about another idea, which is something I really want happening in these games, and that is Kieran turning into a villain. Now, we don't get this much in Pokemon, actual fun villains. We had N. Think about the villains we had, man. We had freaking Rose. We didn't even know what's up with them. And then in Alola, we had Lusamine. These aren't characters we could ever understand. They were just put there as villains and we were meant to beat them. But Kieran, for the first time, if he turned into a villain, we would understand and be able to sympathize with them. So you see, it goes like this. In the first DLC, what Kieran is like the single believer in Ogerpon. Regardless of what the entire village says, he's the only one that believes in Ogerpon and always goes to those festivals looking for Ogerpon, and even wanders away from the village to go to Oni Mountain to find Ogerpon, but he never does. We also don't know Kieran's backstory, how he grew up, but it would seem like he grew up very reserved, shy, and alone. And while he does have a sister, and he does get along with her to an extent, that at the end of the day, he always does feel alone. So he resonated a lot with Ogerpon and whatever Ogerpon represented in the folktale in the village. The grandpa likes to theorize that Kieran intuited that Ogerpon's actually the good one. And while that might be true, Kieran also saw himself in Ogerpon, so he really admired it. And so right off the bat there, we can empathize with Kieran's character. See the rest of the DLC play out. We make it to Kitakami, and we're pretty much being his first friend. If you see how Carmine talks about him, you can see how giddy he is to get close to someone. Look at this line here. He's assuming he's always a pain, so he volunteers to go out of your way. He really doesn't know how to make friends, which is why Carmine has to really third wheel and push for it. And finally, you're his first friend. If you look at the 3 photos we take when we partner up with him, in the first photo, he's very shy, and in the second photo, he's beginning to open up. And then in the third photo, he gets mad, but you can see him actually coming out of his shell. The reason he acts so weird to us is because he's never had a friend before. But there's a turning point to our friendship with them. At a certain point in the story, it's like he starts to reject wanting to hang out with you. And you don't notice this at first. You have to think back to the game. After you start hanging out with Carmine, and he learns that you guys actually met Ogerpon, he stops really wanting to hang out with you. And he might not even be aware he's done it. He might have just subconsciously put up a wall and just wants to enjoy his own company, which is the company he's used to anyway. He's always been alone, right? But think about it. Whenever stuff gets tough for him in the DLC, he always goes back to his room and locks it. It's not like he comes to us, his friend, and talks about it. The last straw of him beginning to grow hatred in his heart is when you find him at Peachy's after he overheard the truth, and he asks you up front to see if you're a true friend and you'll be honest to him or not. And the game forces you to lie. You can tell by the way he's not immediately mad that he thought you were gonna be honest to him. But it's after he knows you're lying that the slight happiness he found in having a friend crashes down. Which is probably one of the biggest straws in the DLC of him wanting to walk his own path and not trust people. But there's another perspective to the DLC, right? So this dude is from Kitakami. He enrolled in Blueberry Academy, but he's just visiting for the festival, and since he was a kid, he's always admired Ogerpon. And what happens? You pop up from Paldia, and within days, you see Ogerpon, something he's lived his whole life wanting to see her. You befriended her, and no matter how many times he tries to show how much he wants to be with Ogerpon, she picks you in the end, who's a nobody to this village, within days. At this point, since he's so closeted mentally, it's like all the admiration he felt for Ogerpon now gets flipped, and it turns into the amount of hatred he has for everyone in Ogerpon. You and Ogerpon were kind of like the 2 rays of hope for him as a friend and as the one he admired, and both of them ended up not being what he wanted. Which is to say it lightly, I think he hates both of them now. But between these two pivotal moments, us lying to him and losing Ogerpon, the former is probably the worser one. And the reason he took losing Ogerpon that badly is probably because he already lost you. If you were honest, he probably wouldn't have minded as much that Ogerpon went with you. But the way the DLC plays out now, both of us end up making him feel betrayed. So it makes sense when you see him at the end of the DLC and he's freaking tying his hair and he's gonna figure out his own way alone to do something, get stronger. This is why I think he should be a villain and not just, you know, a statue at the end of the second DLC with him as champion. And of course, there's another way to look at his character, which is that, you know, he's just a crybaby. It depends how deep you want to look at it. Because for all you know, I'm reading into it like this, and all Game Freak wanted him to be was a crybaby. So if he does turn out to be a villain, this is the making of a villain in front of our own eyes. We never see this in a Pokemon game. And so what I want happening is, instead of Cyrano or Briar being the villains, like Cyrano starting the academy to scheme something, or Briar wanted to resurrect Tropigus to prove Heath right, I want Kieran to be that ultimate bringer of Tropigus. Think about it. Imagine he starts to learn about Tropigus in Blueberry as Briar is uncovering it, and he's the one who brings about a climax where the world is being threatened by Tropigus. Not that Tropigus is evil, but by overhearing their research and him wanting power, he's the one that ultimately goes back into Area Zero and tries to forcefully pull it out to capture it himself. And Heath's drawing where Tropigus looks monstrous and causing storms becomes a reality. But it's that kid that we got to know that starts it all as the big villain. This also kind of makes our other candidates for who the evil one is more solid. I like Cyrano just being a kind director, and I like Briar just earnestly wanting to uncover what Heath did and try to prove his work to everyone. Alright, let's take a step back, and I wanted to talk about how the Loyal 3 resurrected in the first place. Initially, I thought it was because Kieran brought the Teal mask there, which is the last mask that the Loyal 3 couldn't steal from Ogerpon, and the mask Ogerpon was wearing when she killed the Loyal 3. So maybe when Kieran brought it close enough to the shrine that it kind of riled them up and resurrected them. Just imagine that while they were dead, their spirits were alive down there. But another thing that could have caused their resurrection is Kieran's punch. You see, he punches the monument right after we beat him, and he's in like this state of actually being mad. And maybe this kind of anger resurrected the Loyal 3 because it was reminiscent of the Loyal 3's old leader, that kind of pure vengeance and anger that filled him. Oh damn, bro, chill! And I noticed that if you look at the whole DLC, after the Loyal 3 are resurrected, Kieran never meets them. He runs off before they even resurrect, and he never joins us when we go and hunt them down. It's almost like the game itself was setting the circumstances up for them to not meet Kieran, because Kieran's the one that unintentionally resurrected them. And so this brings us to the fourth Loyal Legendary, the Momotaro Pokemon. Now, when we look in the code of the game, we see some name called Doku Taro, which is pretty much like Poison Momotaro, who in mythology would be considered the leader of the Loyal 3. Since it's called Doku Taro, we're gonna assume it's a poison type, if it's not scrapped from the final game. And either it looks like this peach that we can see in Peachy's stand, or this peach is a part of his power that he gave to the Loyal 3 to give them their toxic chains. He's there in the cutscene in the corner. He was there on that day back then. And so the Loyal 3 are off the table right now, but if it's true that the way his energy was in that moment was reminiscent of their leader, what better partner for him than if he went and found the Momotaro Pokemon, and that's his signature in the second DLC. Maybe after he ties his hair at the end, he actually finds the fourth Loyal Legendary and he captures it, and it's on his team when we're fighting him as champion, if that pans out. Of course, it would be a tragedy that the person that admired Ogerpon so much ends up siding with the opposite. You know, just look at this sign. Kieran would be on this side rather than this one. But mentally, it's a real thing that could happen when he feels betrayed by that one he admired. And then this brings us to one last thing, right? So Kayla's capsule is the first one to post about it here. If you go back to the cutscene where we beat Kieran and he's so mad he punches the monument, there is actually purple energy that comes out at that moment. This setup is too good. There's no Game Freak, if you do not make him the big villain, this will be screwed up, man. So this purple aura has led to ideas about how he might have resurrected the Loyal 3. And one popular idea going around is that somehow Kieran got possessed by the Momotaro Peach Pokemon, the 4th legendary. But I don't like this idea because this pretty much makes the whole setup with Kieran meaningless. Being brainwashed usually takes the fun out of these situations. It'd be more fun if the kid just honestly went down a bad path. I want it to be the simple tragedy of something unfair happening to a good person and causing his screws to loosen. Him being possessed by the Peach Pokemon might bring different perspective to this sign here, where the Momotaro is shown to be a person as it is in real life mythology. And so it would almost be like that's Kieran in the picture, you know, symbolically. But if we wanted to give this whole possessed thing a run for its money, maybe we could make the moment he gets possessed somewhere meaningful. Like, instead of him being possessed the whole time, it's at this moment when he punches the shrine that he has the requirements to be that vessel of evil, that it's this moment he gets possessed. As if the 4th loyal legendary maybe died a long time ago and it kind of lived in the hearts of the Loyal 3. And so when Kieran did this, he became like the host for it. This is weird, man. I just want it to be its own Pokemon. I think technically in the code, we don't know if Dokutaro is a Pokemon, you know, so it could just be the code name they use for Kieran when we're fighting him when he's super evil and he's got his hair tied. I suppose that would work too, but I'm gonna say that Dokutaro is a Pokemon and he's just gonna go and capture it, and that's gonna be his new signature. In a way, as Dokutaro's trainer, he would pretty much still be Momotaro. And in the same way that the game forces you to have Ogerpon in like Kieran or Carmine's last match, if I remember correctly, maybe in our last match against Kieran in Blueberry Academy, you're required to have Ogerpon on your team and you get the big clash again. Because remember, if Mr. Peach Boy was in the cutscene back then, this is a long awaited reunion. Now the question is, if Peach Pokemon is its own Pokemon and not something that possessed Kieran, where was it hiding all this time before Kieran found it? There's the Chinese data miner who suggested that the original 3 rivals, Carmine and Kieran, would be involved with us in some story quest. Imagine if it was this, but it was us chasing after Kieran in Area 0 and meeting all sorts of new Paradox Pokemon along the way. So a couple other things. There's also the classic trope of Kieran losing the light in his eyes, the reflection, as if he's dead inside and no longer carrying that good consciousness. Come on, those are the eyes of a villain. And then there's also the official Indigo disc key art I showed you, where Kieran is the only character with his back turned. And come on, he has a crazy final battle theme. We can't waste this, man. The sucker's so mad at me, man. Yo. You know, he did say, just wait for me. If he wants to murder me in the second DLC, Game Freak, you should let him. It's the perfect setup. Alright, I'm gonna call it quits here. Make sure I'll shank that like button and let me know how you want the second DLC to play out. And if you think Kieran should be the big bad too. I got more to talk about, so tune in tomorrow and I'll see you on the next one, my dudes. Take care.